Burkina Faso's military government says it has foiled a fresh coup attempt led by a former army.
Coup attempts against Traore are nothing new. In April 2025, a man standing inches from Captain Ibrahim Traoré was recently offered $5 million to pull the trigger. He didn't. He exposed the plot, and the president lived. But after this, everything changed. The security condition of Burkina Faso has never been better since then. Now, all forces are scared to attempt a coup. But what did Traoré do? Let's find out. When the president of a country learns that one of his bodyguards was approached with a bribe worth millions to end his life, he doesn't just sleep with one eye open. He rebuilds the fortress around him brick by brick, and this time with flamethrowers on every wall. That's exactly what Captain Ibrahim Traoré did. Following the exposure of the $5 million assassination attempt, Traoré's response wasn't emotional. It was strategic, cold, and immediate. He didn't call for a speech. He activated what some insiders now refer to as the lockdown doctrine, a quiet but sweeping overhaul of everything that surrounded him: people, processes, and priorities. At the heart of this transformation was a new security doctrine, one that placed loyalty above rank and surveillance above ceremony. His first move? Reconfiguring the Presidential Guard, the very unit that had been infiltrated with whispers of treason. Entire teams were reshuffled, new operatives were recruited from obscure branches, and a new tier of background screening was introduced. Some say even personal histories were dug into, tracing back to school records, tribal affiliations, and overseas contacts. But physical proximity wasn't the only concern. Traoré understood something deeper. You don't need a gun to kill a revolution, just a leak, a signal, or an open back door. So he turned inward. Communication systems were encrypted. Phone access in sensitive areas was restricted. Foreign consultants, especially those linked to international NGOs or embassies, were quietly removed from proximity to decision-making zones. More notably, the Office of Internal Counterintelligence, a relatively dormant bureau under previous administrations, was revived with an expanded mandate. Its mission was no longer just about spying on external threats. It was now tasked with mapping the political allegiances of officers, cabinet members, provincial commanders, and even local police chiefs. Anyone who couldn't be accounted for ideologically was either sidelined or assigned harmless roles far from power corridors. And then there was the weapon Traoré had been refining since his earliest days in power, the VDP Volontaires pour la Défense de la Patrie. While officially framed as civilian defense groups trained to fight insurgents in remote areas, the VDP had quietly evolved into a second layer of protection for the regime itself. Unlike the traditional army, which had deep-rooted loyalties to older elites or French-trained commanders, the VDP were young, rural, underprivileged, and fiercely loyal to Traoré, the man who gave them uniforms, stipends, and purpose. After the plot, the VDP was mobilized in new ways. Some units were pulled back from border zones and stationed strategically near major administrative centers. Others were embedded into military bases, acting as silent watchdogs. What Traoré was building wasn't just a counterinsurgency force. He created an internal immune system against betrayal. To support this, Burkina Faso's Interior Ministry quietly rolled out new biometric tracking programs under the guise of national registration efforts. But reports suggest these systems are being leveraged to monitor movements of specific individuals flagged by the intelligence community. Surveillance now includes digital footprints, not just physical ones. But if this all sounds like a dictator tightening his grip, it's worth remembering. Burkina Faso isn't Denmark. This is a country under siege, from within and from without. Every week, armed factions loyal to no-flag burn villages. Foreign powers whisper through NGOs. French influence still lingers in the shadows, and the regional military order is cracking at its foundation. In this context, Traoré's moves weren't just a response to a personal threat. They were a declaration of total war against the invisible enemy. Publicly, very little was said. Traoré did not hold grand press conferences to announce his new guard or parade arrests through the streets. The silence was intentional, a tactic to starve the conspirators of information while feeding their fear. What they now knew was this: someone talked, someone flipped, and the man they tried to kill had not only survived, he was more protected. more paranoid, and more prepared than ever. And it worked. In the weeks following the foiled plot, rumors of secondary conspiracies began to evaporate. Officers who once walked with swagger began asking to be reassigned to quieter posts. Key ministries started operating under tighter protocols. Even international observers, many of whom had criticized Traoré for his populist tactics, admitted that the speed and efficiency of the security overhaul were unlike anything seen in the Sahel in decades. But here's the thing about fortresses. No matter how high the walls, it only takes one open gate to let the enemy in. And the walls Traoré just built may be high, but the battlefield is vast. So the question now isn't just how he protected himself, it's why he had to. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Before anyone can judge Traoré's iron grip, they need to understand the battlefield he inherited. Not the ideological one, not the rhetorical one, but the real one. A battlefield where presidents don't just lose elections, they disappear. A place where power doesn't slip. It's snatched in the middle of the night, sometimes with tanks, sometimes with whispers, always with blood. Burkina Faso, for the last 5 years, hasn't been governed. It's been fought over. When Traoré seized power in September 2022, he didn't walk into a palace. He stepped into a trap. The previous junta leader, Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, had promised to restore order after overthrowing President Traoré. But instead, he became the very symbol of inertia and foreign dependence, particularly on France. The country kept bleeding. Militants torched villages. The military cracked from within. And the people. They watched as another uniformed man failed to protect them. That's when Traoré struck. At just 34 years old, he overthrew Damiba in a bold, near-bloodless coup, a rare moment of national applause. Many saw him as the Thomas Sankara of the new generation, young, defiant, Pan-African. But that moment didn't last long, because from the second he took power, the knives started sharpening. Between 2023 and 2024, there were 4 separate coup attempts against him. Not rumors, not speculation. Confirmed plots by military insiders, some of whom were close to the very core of Burkina's command structure. The first attempt came just months after his rise, led by officers still loyal to Damiba, some of whom were reportedly supported by regional actors unhappy with Traoré's anti-French stance. They underestimated him. The plot was exposed, arrests were made, and Traoré publicly reminded the nation that not every enemy wears a beard and carries a Quran. Some wear stars and speak French. But the danger didn't end there. The second and third attempts were more insidious. One involved mid-level officers stationed at a key military base outside Ouagadougou. They had quietly been building alliances, rallying discontent over delayed salaries and aggressive reforms. The fourth, perhaps the most alarming, came from within the National Gendarmerie. It was a signal that even elite forces tasked with protecting the state had fractures deep enough to bleed treason. Each attempt forced Traoré to evolve. The enemies weren't always armed with weapons. Some came with briefcases, others with microphones. Western diplomats began asking too many questions. Foreign aid workers lingered in the wrong areas. Old political families, once quiet, started testing the air again. It wasn't paranoia. It was the echo of a truth Traoré could no longer ignore. He wasn't just fighting insurgents. He was surrounded. And let's not forget the chaos outside the capital. Burkina Faso is being torn apart by insurgents. Over 50% of its territory is under partial or complete control of insurgent groups. The state is shrinking. In some regions, the flag no longer flies. And in this vacuum, local leaders, warlords, and militants become lawmakers, tax collectors, and executioners. It's no coincidence that every coup plot intensified after a major insurgent victory. Each loss on the battlefield didn't just embolden the insurgents, it signaled weakness inside the government. Military officers, frustrated by the lack of coordination or short supplies, began looking for someone else to follow. And foreign actors, especially those with interests in uranium, gold, and political influence in the Sahel, began probing for a crack they could turn into an opportunity. This was the breeding ground for assassination. You don't need to send drones or drop bombs when a desperate man with access and ambition can be paid to pull the trigger. This is the environment that led to the $5 million offer. Not a random act of violence, a calculated investment. Traore wasn't just in danger because he ruled. He was in danger because of how he ruled. Boldly, nationalistically, and against the grain of everyone who still benefits from Africa being weak and divided. And when you lead like that, the enemies multiply. Traore knew the $5 million bribe wasn't the first attempt. It was just the first with a number attached. The 4 coup attempts proved something much more terrifying. The enemy can be anyone. A soldier in uniform, a senior officer, a man at the table, a man who salutes. This is why the security reform wasn't a response to a single threat. It was a response to a climate where loyalty can't be assumed, and silence can mean conspiracy. This is why he restructured his guard. Why did he shift the intelligence apparatus? Why did he build a secondary army out of civilians? Because the coup doesn't start at the gate. It starts with the man holding the keys. And now, the key holder himself wants to know, who's waiting behind the next door? The gun never fired, but the question echoes louder than any explosion. Who put $5 million on Traoré's head? Who had the motive, the means, and the confidence to try and buy off the man standing closest to the president of Burkina Faso? Whoever it was, they weren't guessing. They knew Traoré's vulnerability. Not in the battlefield, but in the quiet, personal space where power breathes alone. They knew when to strike, who to approach, and how much money it would take to tempt betrayal. This wasn't a random rebel with a grudge. It was someone who believed the assassination would be a turning point, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire region. So let's follow the clues, not the headlines. Start with the most obvious suspects. Internal military figures. Not the foot soldiers, but the ghosts in medals. The former commanders who lost everything when Traoré took over. Many of them had enjoyed years of status, wealth, and unquestioned influence under the previous regimes. When Traoré came in, young, defiant, and unapologetically Pan-African, they were sidelined overnight. No more French-sponsored training seminars, no more backdoor arms deals, no more soft power from the old world. Just a young captain realigning Burkina Faso towards something new, something threatening to their comfort. And then there's the political elite, the once untouchable families who had formed tight alliances with foreign investors, aid programs, and multinational corporations. These weren't revolutionaries. They were merchants of influence. Traoré cut their pipelines. He nationalized key infrastructure, reviewed mining contracts, and began expelling foreign NGOs that were entangled with elite networks. For them, Traoré wasn't just dangerous, he was a financial threat. But the reach of this plot likely extends beyond Burkina Faso's borders. And this is where it gets darker. There's a reason why the streets of Ouagadougou have been echoing a particular suspicion since the plot was exposed. La France est derrière ça. France is behind this. Now, there is no hard evidence, no official accusations, but the pattern is familiar. Since Traoré took power, France has seen its Sahel strategy collapse like a house of cards. First Mali, then Burkina Faso, then Niger. One by one, French troops were expelled. Embassies were scaled back, military agreements torn apart, French media outlets were banned. What had once been Paris's proud zone of influence became a geopolitical black hole. And at the center of that storm was Ibrahim Traoré. He wasn't just defiant, he was surgical. He spoke of decolonization, not as an idea, but as a daily policy. When he stood in public squares and shouted, "The land belongs to the people, not the empire," he wasn't just firing up crowds. He was throwing fuel on centuries of buried resistance. So imagine you're a former colonial power watching your entire strategy unravel, your influence evaporate, and a new alliance forming, an anti-French, anti-Western front. You see Russia moving in. You see local support growing. You see other African leaders considering similar paths. At what point do you stop watching and start acting? That's why some suspect that intelligence services may be involved, not officially, but through the well-known dance of deniable operations. Private military contractors, disinformation campaigns, and well-funded intermediaries. All tools used before in regions where instability offered convenient access. But France isn't the only power with a motive. The United States, though more cautious, has strategic interests in counterinsurgency operations in the Sahel. With Traoré kicking out Western troops and pulling closer to Russia, it disrupts Washington's drone networks, regional cooperation models, and the stability partners they've tried to nurture. And while the US would be more likely to pressure through economic levers or diplomatic isolation, the assassination of a defiant leader has precedent, especially when framed as an internal conflict. Then there's Russia. Ironically, the only player that seems to gain more when Traoré survives. Moscow is watching its influence in Africa grow, especially as Western allies pull out. While they're unlikely to be behind the plot, they're certainly watching closely, offering silent reassurance and political cover to Traoré's tightening grip. But the most dangerous suspect of all may not be a country, it may be a network. A convergence of disillusioned elites, ex-generals, foreign contractors, and financial stakeholders who see Traoré's revolution as bad for business. These networks thrive in chaos. They don't need flags or national anthems. They need gold, lithium, control over ports, and silence from leaders. And Traoré isn't silent. He's loud enough to wake up the ghosts of Sankara, loud enough to be heard in Niger, in Mali, in Chad, in South Africa. That's why someone offered $5 million, not to kill a man, to kill a movement, and yet the movement lives, for now. The plot failed, the message didn't, which leads us to the next question. Even with all the new security, is he truly safe now? Or was this just the first strike in a longer game? The bribe didn't work, the bullet never flew, the president is still alive, but survival in this game isn't victory, it's just the next round. After the failed $5 million assassination attempt, Ibrahim Traoré has reinforced his presidency like a man preparing for siege warfare. Layers of bodyguards, private informants, digital surveillance, restructured command chains. On paper, he looks untouchable. But in reality, the walls may be taller, but the fire outside is hotter. Security in Burkina Faso isn't just about stopping assassins. It's about navigating a minefield of enemies that never walk in a straight line. Some wear uniforms, some wear suits, some wear smiles, and some don't even exist yet until desperation, revenge, or money calls them into being. That's the paradox Traoré faces. His greatest weakness isn't an enemy, it's time. Because every second he stays in power, he increases both his influence and his list of enemies. For every reform he pushes, someone else loses power, money, or relevance. For every border he secures, a smuggler loses a route. For every French firm denied a contract, a diplomat makes a phone call. Protection buys him days, not guarantees. Let's start with the most critical layer of his new security: human loyalty. Traoré has doubled down on screening, monitoring, and rewarding those closest to him. But humans are volatile. Loyalty can turn sour in silence. Resentment brews quietly, especially when power shifts fast. Ambition, rivalry, fear. These things eat at the inside of any inner circle, and no amount of cameras or background checks can detect betrayal still waiting to be born. And while Traoré's intelligence network is more active than ever, digging into communications, mapping military gossip, even tracking financial transfers, there's a difference between surveillance and omniscience. You can monitor phones, but you can't intercept unspoken bitterness. You can trace encrypted emails, but not hallway glances or midnight conversations in courtyards. The very act of tightening control often creates the very thing it tries to prevent: desperation. Officers passed over for promotions, loyalists who feel expendable. Volunteers who once fought with purpose are now watching their villages being neglected. The pressure cooker effect is real. And in Burkina Faso, where coups are whispered before they're fired, you don't always see the next plot coming. You feel it shifting in the air. Even the volunteers for the defense of the homeland VDP, who remain one of Traoré's most loyal tools, are not immune to this decay. Many of them are unpaid or underpaid, operating in brutal terrain with little backup. They may love Traoré today, but in war zones, hope has an expiration date. If morale dips, or if they begin to feel they're being used as pawns without real empowerment, loyalty can corrode fast. Then there's the external environment, which no security reform can fully neutralize. Traoré's turn toward Russia and the Sahel military alliance has earned him friends, but also made him a target. The West is watching, some of them are waiting. And in international politics, waiting is often more dangerous than attacking. It allows doubt to fester, allies to drift, and enemies to plot slowly, methodically, and with plausible deniability. One doesn't need to send an assassin when economic sabotage can be just as lethal. Foreign banking systems can freeze aid. Tech companies can sever connections. Algorithms can amplify unrest. Some wars never make headlines, and Burkina Faso is already fighting several of them in silence. Then there's public perception, which is its kind of armor, or poison. Right now, Traoré commands considerable support. He's seen as a symbol of resistance, especially among youth, rural communities, and anti-colonial thinkers across Africa. But support is not static. It requires results. And so far, the insurgency still rages, the economy still limps, and many regions remain lawless. If those conditions don't improve, even the most devoted followers begin to ask hard questions. Is this revolution working? Are we safer? Is he fighting for us, or just building another elite? Once doubt seeps in, no wall is thick enough to hold it back. And if Traoré does fall, it may not be from a bullet or a coup. It might be from a silence in the streets, a silence among the people, a silence where cheers once roared. Which brings us back to the question, is Traoré safe now? The answer is this: he is safer than he was before, but not safe. He has bought time, but time is not loyal. It listens to the next man too. The palace may be guarded, but the system around him, the economy, the morale, the alliances, the whispers in army tents and market stalls, those are not as easy to secure. And in Burkina Faso, history has shown again and again, fortresses don't save leaders. Momentum does. And if Traoré can't maintain that momentum, his enemies won't need another $5 million. They'll need a window of weakness. Just one. So what happens next? Do you think they can take down Traoré? Let us know in the comments section, what will it take to do that? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.